Today's topics: the USTR's proposed tariff on Chinese-built ships. We'll discuss if AI and maritime is really a thing, or if it's just a new way to sell the same old technology. Lastly, we'll discuss the biggest disruptors to the freight rates in the next 1 to 2 years. Ship and Tell is where professional mariners come to discuss, argue, and occasionally fight about all things maritime. We pick a topic, we talk, and a winner is crowned.
Welcome to Ship and Tell, the show where maritime pros go head-to-head with the robot. In the words of ChatGPT, let's dive in.
The U.S. Trade Representative proposes a $1.5 million fee per U.S. port call for Chinese-built ships to curb China's dominance in shipbuilding. The World Shipping Council, representing owners, opposes the move, while unions, hit hardest by job losses, support it. What's your take?
U.S. shipbuilders and unions win if they play it right. China builds over 50% of the world's new ships, while the U.S. produces less than 1%. So this tariff is a rare shot at regaining market share. But shipbuilders need to modernize fast. China's efficiency means they deliver vessels up to 30% cheaper. Unions gain leverage for better wages and job security as demand shifts. But here's the risk. If the World Shipping Council pushes back hard, carriers might reroute to Canada or Mexico, dodging the $1.5 million per call fee entirely. So yeah, there's an opportunity here, but if the U.S. industry acts fast. Let's see what the broker and engineer have to say.
All right, Matt, what do you got to say to the robot? What are your thoughts on this?
How's it going, guys? Yeah, so, I have a hard time believing this comes to fruition, at least in the way that it was initially presented. It would be a disaster for the tanker market, but I don't even think that that's the market that probably, hurts the worst from it. When you look at the container market, gets passed on to the consumer. Very arbitrary. I think you can invest in your own maritime space without penalizing someone else's. If it does end up coming to fruition, and I think the meeting is March 24th, I envision it being a more watered down version, or maybe more Chinese controlled tonnage specific, kind of like what they inadvertently did with Costco sanctions in 2019, something like that, versus just any ship built in China. I mean, that sounds far-fetched to me.
All right, thanks. James, you're next. What are your thoughts?
I'm not going to waste any time trying to predict what this administration is going to do, and I don't think anybody should put their money on that. For me, the unions definitely win, but we're talking decades long if we're successful, right? So that sustained focus over decades. The USTR report basically gave us the blueprint on how to be successful for the shipbuilding, right? Because they just mapped out how China did it over the last 25 years. The goal should be, I think the question is, can we beat 25 years, right? And then as far as the short term, from a ship owner perspective, their voices are not being heard in all of this. And that's where the WSC is coming into play. But the ship owners, they need to think about where the cargo's coming from and where the cargo's going to in the future. And they're going to have to position themselves accordingly.
Matt, any response to that?
I mean, I think there's a lot that would other than money. I mean, I don't know the labor, the space, but we could do it. I mean, if you have enough money, I guess you can kind of solve most of your problems. But it's a massive endeavor, and I think that tariffing port calls is a far too simple starting point for the problem. Maybe
simple question for each of you: yes or no? Will this come to fruition? James.
I say no.
Matt.
No.
All right.
It's a big thing though. Like today, I got a clause from BP. BP wants the owner to pay for it, and the owner is like, no.
The owners will always, they're just going to position themselves to their job in supporting the economic, the economic machine of the world is to pass on how much it costs, right? Like they're not doing it for anybody else. They're doing it for end user and for the suppliers. They're just helping facilitate that. Ship owners shouldn't have to pay for it.
Agreed. Right. Yeah.
ChatGPT said yes, fellas. So time will tell. Kind of a topic you guys haven't heard much about. It's called AI. And the question is, anyone actually using AI? But it's hard to tell what's real and what's just chatter out there. In your areas of focus, James, being an engineer and specializing in tech and digitalization, and Matt being a broker and being just right at the front of the industry, do you guys believe companies are actually using this, or is it just talk nonsense? All right, James, you got the floor.
For me, I mean, it depends on how you want to define A. I think it's everywhere right now in small ways. More people I talk to, I mean, almost everybody I talk to is using it for to help clean up emails or LinkedIn posts, what have you. But when it comes to the actual industry knowledge, it definitely falls short and leaves people wanting more, right? So more industry generated tools that are actually helping real problems for companies. And so I don't think we've seen massive layoffs. We haven't seen 50% increase in productivity when doing these kind of things. So I don't think AI has really moved into industry specific use cases just yet.
All right, Matt, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so as a dirty kind of spot tanker broker, haven't seen it make a huge impact. We are seeing it with weather routing services, I guess, with varying degrees of success. One other area that we've seen it is one of the, traditional Greek ship owning families. The Martinos family has a cousin that started a company called Signal, and Signal is using it on their platform, I think, for weather routing and distance calculations, but also for voyage. I guess like they're using the voyage data to formulate an educated guess on what ships have done if it's not been reported in the market. So
Yeah, and that, and I also specifically said AI, and machine learning algorithm on a predictive model can be AI, opposed to the large language models that we're going. So we left that open ended, but I know a lot of people out there are attempting to use it for optimization, those things. But let's see what the old robot has to say, which, since it gets all of its information from the internet, is probably going to talk a lot about optimization and maybe autonomous shipping. I don't know. Let's see.
AI in shipping is mostly talk, but real adoption exists in fuel optimization and predictive maintenance, because saving 1% on fuel is millions saved. Ports like LA and Rotterdam are testing AI for congestion, but bureaucracy slows progress. The biggest problem? Data. Most firms still run on outdated systems, making AI integration a nightmare. Even Gartner's hype cycle for AI in supply chain, 2023, labels maritime AI as emerging and experimental, not mainstream. Meanwhile, tech vendors flood LinkedIn with hype, but without clean data and real execution, AI in maritime stays niche, not mainstream.
When she was referencing for the problems of data, thoughts?
Yeah, for me, a lot of this, again, when it comes down to the industry specific, right, and that tacit knowledge that we all have from the experience, I would consider that. So the lack of data is all the decisions and experience in our head. Are we really going to transfer that to AI as
Yeah.
opposed to as opposed to other industries like software where they could read the software and train it on how to develop software at Google and Microsoft, right? And we're seeing huge productivity increases, or how it writes books because it's all in text. But as far as data, is that what everybody's waiting for? Is for us to transfer all of our knowledge to AI so it can make the human decisions that we're making now? I think that's just that we're lacking data is such a lame cop out that we've been hearing for years, instead
Yeah.
of just building more useful tools.
Yeah. And it's interesting that, always starts with optimization. And she references the point that, yeah, if you get 1% of fuel optimization, however, there's a lot of people trying it, a lot of companies trialing it, but I haven't heard from a lot of people who've had the success. And I think it's great that companies out there like Zero North are giving it a go, and others, but I still haven't heard of any real world adoption yet. But go ahead,
no,
Matt.
that seems fair. Yeah, I couldn't speak to what parts of Signal's platform they're using it in, but
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, they're also a ship owner, and I think the interesting thing about the shipping market is it tends to be very sentiment driven. And while it is a good example of pure supply and demand, if it was as simple as supply and demand, then you wouldn't see the erratic swings that you see sometimes. So, I would imagine that AI would kind of struggle to formulate a forecast built around sentiment. So,
Yeah, that's a good point. Um, I used to work for a cash buyer of scrap ships, and that was part of my job was to measure sentiment of the Indian rupee because that would determine how willing they were to purchase scrap ships because they wouldn't make the money from scrapping the ship for another 6 months. So if they thought the currency was going down or up, it had a huge impact because if they bought the ship for this price and 6 months later currency goes up or down, it really changes. So
yeah,
So I,
you thought you were dealing with like a ship transaction, and it was actually a currency hedge or
so I think the models we have now are awesome at sentiment analysis, but it's like saying
uh,
like, oh, we don't have enough data to model the stock market. It's like, yeah, of course we don't, but does that mean that we can't build useful tools? No, there's plenty of algorithmic training and other data that we can use, but what you just want us to replace all the human traders with AI? Then what's the point, right? So I think that's kind of this like lack of data is why everybody can't make money in the stock market. It just doesn't make sense.
yeah, I do feel like lack of data is kind of honestly just a lazy answer. I mean, you could pretty much say that for anything, whether it's AI or trying to pick which
Or,
restaurant to
or the
go
stock
to. Like, I
market.
don't know what they serve there. I can't make a decision. So, you know, as we look in the future, right, we want to anticipate factors that could actually impact freight rates, right? So, in your view, what do you guys see as some legit disruptions that could happen over the next 1 to 2 years that have the biggest impact on freight rates? Let's go to the robot, see what she thinks.
3 major disruptions. Red Sea and Panama Canal. Houthi attacks force longer routes, adding 10 plus days. Canal restrictions cut transits by 36%, squeezing capacity. Decarbonization costs. EU carbon fees add $50,000 plus per voyage. IMO rules force slower speeds, reducing available ships. China and trade policies. China builds 54% of ships. U.S. tariffs could tighten supply, pushing rates up. Bottom line? Volatility is here. Rates stay high until tensions ease and regulations settle.
Matt, this is kind of a lot in your wheelhouse. What do you think?
I mean, her take, I guess, just broad strokes across dry, wet, container, maybe that's fair. But if you're talking specifically the wet markets, I think the biggest thing that will dictate how the next few years go is how the European and US government decide to handle um, Russian sanctions. And not just Russian sanctions, to a lesser extent, Iranian and Venezuelan sanctions. But if you look at where the majority of the crude is moving, potentially on the gray or dark fleet, I think that Russia will be the biggest story. And I don't think anyone knows how it's going to play out. So that would be my answer there.
James, thoughts to that?
Oh, you're going to get an engineer's perspective on on a macroeconomic question.
I just asked
So
a robot.
I mean, but usual, the rates are always going to be external, right? We're here to serve the economic engine of the world, so it's going to be geopolitics with Russia and the Ukraine. If there's and that kind of came up pretty short on everybody's radar and really impacted the rate. So it's hard to say what it's going to look like in 1 or 2 years. But I would say geopolitics is always number one, followed by more artificial influences like tariffs, and then finally carbon levies, which is probably going to have the least amount of impact if I had to prioritize them.
So it sounds like there's kind of an agreement between all three that a lot of this is political.
Definitely. I mean, I tend to think about a market working most efficiently, and then as you layer on government intervention in whatever form or fashion, as it becomes less efficient, then assuming that the demand and supply are static, then the rates would go up. So,
All right. Okay. Hey, thanks for coming, Matt. You're our winner. I'm setting a clock for 20 seconds, and I want to know from you, who is someone that you want to thank that's been a huge part of either your life or professional career? Just someone, kind of like we're at the Oscars. You want, who are you going to thank for making you a successful ship and
yeah,
tell guest? You
nice.
won
Yeah,
your award.
the easy answer for me is my old boss, Roger Marco. Great guy. Miss working with him. But also like to take a minute to give a shout out to Charles Bonner. He needs all of our prayers and well wishes. He's sick in the hospital right now, a classmate of ours. So hope you feel better, Charles.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we'll be praying for him. Appreciate your time.
There once was a ship that put to sea. The name of the ship was a Billy of Tea. The winds blew up her bow, up down, oh below my bully boys blow.